Well, thank you all very much for a wonderful meeting and for the opportunity to present today. I'm Katherine Mertes, a research ecologist at the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, and this is my colleague, Kristen Whyle. And today we're gonna share some insights into how scimitar-horned oryx reintroduced into Chad respond to their highly seasonal environment based on an analysis of animal movement data. So the reintroduction of oryx and addax in Chad is led by the Environment Agency Abu Dhabi in partnership with the government of Chad and implemented on the ground by SCF, and SCBI is grateful for the opportunity to contribute to this incredible conservation initiative. So many of you are aware of the timeline and causes of the scimitar-horned oryx's extinction in the wild, so I won't go into great detail. I'll just remind everyone that the first oryx were transported from Abu Dhabi to Chad in 2016, and to date we've released more than 200 animals into the Reserve de Fauna Wadi Rimeh Wadi Hashim, shown here. And more than 70% of translocated oryx survive to date, and more than 80% of translocated females have given birth to at least one calf. So very promising early signs of growth for this population. Nearly every oryx released into the reserve carries a GPS satellite collar that collects a GPS position every 1, 2, or 4 hours. And we can use the resulting very large set of movement data to address many questions, including simply to see where oryx go after they're released. When we take the central 97.5% of all GPS locations to date, we see that reintroduced oryx are primarily using an area in the southeast section of the reserve that's about 16,000 square kilometers, about 20% of the reserve's total area.
As we know, Sahelian landscapes, including the subdesert grasslands of the reserve, exhibit extreme variation in rainfall and vegetation productivity over a typical year. And unsurprisingly, reintroduced oryx alter their movement behavior across this large variation in environmental conditions. So these figures start on January 1st on the left side and go to December 31st on the right. The upper plot shows mean hourly movement rate across the year, and the lower plot shows the straight line distance the oryx moved each day across the year. Blue lines show the mean movement rate or net distance moved during the entire 24-hour day, while red lines show movement rate and distance moved during only daytime hours, and black lines show only nighttime hours. And you can see that oryx movement rate and timing varies strongly across the year. Oryx movement rates are highest during the wet season, July through September, highlighted in green, when animals are likely maximizing opportunities to forage and gain body condition. Movement rates are also quite high during peak dry season conditions, March through May, highlighted in red, potentially because resources are rare and widely dispersed at this time. But animals switch to higher movement rates at night, likely to avoid the energy costs of moving around during the hottest hours of the day. Given this large variation in movement behavior across a typical year, we wanted to delineate seasons from the point of view of an oryx. By using movement data, we integrate across many different factors like temperature, vegetation greenness, and precipitation that all affect oryx to directly capture the species' response to its dynamic environment. To do this, we calculated mean daytime movement rate for 68 oryx, 42 females, and 26 males, who retained at least 1 year of collar data after removing a generous 25-week post-release period. The final data set had about 25,000 data points from 2017 to 2021. We use Bayesian generalized additive mix models to fit an annual response curve of mean daytime movement rates. We evaluated possible model structures and selected age, release group, and reproductive state as covariates, included temporal dependence among consecutive daily movement rates, and used random intercepts for individual oryx. We then used the predictions from the best model to estimate when oryx transitioned between movement strategies. The best model explained substantial variation in oryx movement rates over the year and included reproductive state, age, release group, temporal autocorrelation, and oryx ID. The upper figure shows mean population level Oryx daytime movement rates across the calendar year predicted by the BEST model. Although they helped explain some variance, release group and age did not strongly affect changes in movement rate, and you can see in the lower figure that predicted movement rates are very similar across release groups. In contrast, reproductive state strongly influences Oryx movement rates across seasons and when Oryx switch between seasonal movement strategies. These figures show predicted movement rates across the year for 8 Oryx reproductive states. The upper figure shows males and females without calves. These reproductive states show the smallest changes in movement rates across typical environmental variation. The lower figure shows females of any pregnancy state who have calves and late-term females with no calves. These states showed the greatest changes in movement rates across the year. Late-term females with young calves had the lowest movement rates overall, and they also transitioned among seasonal movement strategies much later than other states.
So now that we've identified this overall mean model prediction, we can identify the specific dates at which Oryx are switching between seasonal movement strategies. So the red areas highlighted on this upper figure show days when Oryx are traveling at the mean movement rate across the entire population across the whole year. We can consider these indicators of transitions among seasonal movement strategies. And this approach identified 3 seasons that are ecologically relevant to Oryx and that also align fairly well with annual environmental variation. And once we identify these seasonal transition dates, we can partition Oryx movement data into different time periods with confidence that these periods are actually ecologically relevant to the animal. And when we estimate space use for the population, again, removing a generous post-release period to exclude explorations and naive movements, we see that Oryx space use varies dramatically across seasons. So during the longest season, the dry cool season, reintroduced Oryx actually used the smallest area of about 3,000 square kilometers, and that's shown in green here. And during the shortest season, the rainy cool season, which is of course the most productive for local vegetation, Oryx moved much further north and west and increased their space use by about 3 times, moving across an area of about 10,000 square kilometers. So just to briefly summarize, we found strong evidence for 3 seasons that are ecologically relevant to Oryx reintroduced into Chad. Reproductive state, especially the combination of late-term pregnancy and the presence of a young calf, strongly affects both the changes in movement rates across time and when Oryx switch between these seasonal movement strategies. And this information on where and when reintroduced Oryx use different resources and habitats in the reserve can contribute to ongoing reserve planning. In the immediate future, Oryx seasonal movement areas will be used in upcoming workshops to discuss potential zones of enhanced protection or enforcement within the reserve. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your attention and especially thank the people and organizations who make this work possible, especially the Environment Agency, Abu Dhabi, the government of Chad, the Sahara Conservation Fund, the Ecological Monitoring Team, and the BOSB Safe in Chad, and many other collaborators. Thank you.